Hey guys, what's up? Calendar with Droid Life, and it's time to do some comparisons. All right, so we've got the Galaxy S4 in hand, which you guys know, but we want to compare it to the HTC One, Nexus 4, and the Galaxy S3. Since the Galaxy S4 and the HTC One are essentially the two hottest smartphones of the planet this year, this is what we really care about, right? We'll get into these other two, but we really want to dive right into the HTC One. So we're going to start there, work our way down, give you guys an idea of what we're working with here as far as how these two compare against one another, right? So when you pick each other up, obviously you've got really, really light plastic here on the right. You've got a pretty light device in the HTC One, definitely all metal, aluminum body, so it's gonna feel unbelievably different. The Samsung Galaxy S4 to me feels like any other Samsung device, sort of like the Galaxy S3. That doesn't necessarily mean it feels bad, it just feels like sort of the polished, glossy plastic that you guys are used to. So whether you like that or not, sort of up to you. The HTC One just feels like no other device on the planet other than, you know, maybe the iPhone 5, just because it has that premium sort of aluminum build. When you pick it up and lift it, it just feels like a premium device. It feels like you're holding one of the nicest smartphones ever made. Galaxy S4, I don't necessarily know that you're ever going to feel like it's the nicest smartphone ever made. Now, I'm not trying to just trash on, I'm just saying when compared to the HTC One, it really is night and day. We're talking aluminum, metal, unibody, zero gap here. We're talking about a plastic smartphone over here. Okay, so completely different. From a spec standpoint, they're actually pretty similar. We've got a 5-inch full HD, so 1080p display on the Galaxy S4, and it's Super AMOLED, the first device ever with a 5-inch full HD Super AMOLED. So that's what we're working with here. It's gorgeous. On the HTC One, we've got a 4.7-inch full HD, so 1080p LCD display, which is equally as gorgeous. It's just not going to be quite as vibrant and sort of in your face as the AMOLED on the Galaxy S4 is. So colors are going to be a little more blown out, cartoonish, if you will, on the Galaxy S4. I tend to like that. The HTC One is just going to be a little more subtle. I probably should have been a good person and put on the exact same wallpaper so you could tell, but you can see the colors are just in general a little bit more subtle on the HTC One. So those are the displays. We'll come back to sort of software in a second. On the inside, we've got the same processor. It's a Snapdragon 600 quad-core, but on the Galaxy S4, it's actually clocked at 1.9 gigahertz, and on the HTC One, you're looking at 1.7 gigahertz. So I'm not sure if one's clocked down or one's clocked up. Same processor, just different speeds. You have 2 gig of RAM in each device. You have 32 gigabytes of storage or 64 gigabytes of storage in the HTC One, depending on which model you go with. On the Galaxy S4, you can either go with 16, 32, or 64 gigabytes of internal storage. But then the big key here is the Galaxy S4 has a micro SD card slot, so you can actually throw in a 64 gigabyte micro SD card and really up the storage on this device. With the HTC One, you're stuck with either the 32 or 64 gigabytes internal storage, and that's it. There's no SD card slot, so you can't expand the storage. When we talk about cameras, we've got a 13 megapixel shooter here on the Galaxy S4, and you have a 4 megapixel camera here on the HTC One. Yes, I know it's actually called the Ultra Pixel, but we all know that's just a marketing term from HTC. It's actually a 4 megapixel camera, just shoots pictures with bigger pixels. Okay, so it's a little bit different, definitely a different way of looking at cameras. We can argue all day about whether or not the HTC One camera is the right direction to go or not. That's just what we're looking at between these two devices. You can see the Galaxy S4 sort of has the HTC One X. If you remember the One X from last year, it sort of had the nipple on it. It's definitely sort of got a little nipple there. HTC One is essentially flush, if not a little recessed in the device there. They each have a flash. If we talk about batteries for a second, we've got a, I believe, 2600 milliamp hour battery in the Galaxy S4, which is removable. You can take this back off and you can actually put in new battery, fresh battery. I'm sure they'll have an extended battery that you can put on here as well. So you're sort of set for life with batteries on the Galaxy S4. HTC One, on the other hand, 2300 milliamp hour internal battery that cannot be removed. Okay, so no battery swapping. Hopefully the battery life is exceptional. When I tested and reviewed it, the battery life was actually pretty good, so you shouldn't have too much to worry about unless you're a really, really heavy user. You've got 3.5mm headphone jacks on the top of each device. On the HTC One, you have a power lock switch that's also doubles as an IR blaster, so you can control TVs and things like that. I believe this other slot right here on the Galaxy S4 is an IR blaster as well, so you can control TV and all of that good stuff there. So no real change there. The HTC One is 9.3 millimeters thick. The Galaxy S4 is 7.9 millimeters thick. So HTC One is going to be a little bit thicker, HTC One thicker, but not by much. We're talking a millimeter, just over a millimeter. You're probably not even going to notice in hand. And in fact, feeling them both in hand, I can't tell. Not that I would think the HTC One's thinner, but it almost feels a little bit just because it sort of has this rounded backside. You can see it sort of makes this pillowy sort of shape. Galaxy S4, on the other hand, is a lot more squared off. Okay. So weight-wise, 143 grams here, 130 grams here. So definitely a little bit of weight difference, nothing crazy. Android 4.1.2 on the HTC One, Android 4.2.2 on the Galaxy S4. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. If we start comparing just sides and device in general, so I've got the bottoms basically lined up there. You have a volume rocker on the left side of the Galaxy S4. You have just a SIM slot on the HTC One. Okay. You can also see the HTC One is definitely taller than the Galaxy S4. See that? Okay. On the bottom, you have micro USB ports on both of them. There's microphones as well. The Galaxy S4 definitely doubles as an MHL port. I do not know, I apologize if the HTC One is. I would assume it's also an HML port. MHL. Did I just say HML? MHL port. Okay. If we go to this side, the right side, we have a lock power switch on the Galaxy S4, and on the HTC One, you have a volume rocker. So definitely different styles in terms of buttons. We've got volume rocker where your thumb would be on the HTC One, and you have a lock button on the Galaxy S4 where your thumb would be. When you're making a call, you have nothing on the left side for your fingers to mess with on the HTC One. On the Galaxy S4, you have a volume rocker that can be adjusted sort of on the fly. And then again, the top is where the lock switch is for the HTC One. Let me go ahead and switch hands again. So that's where you're looking as far as hardware goes. Now, the design of them couldn't be different, more different, I guess I should say. Actually, here, let me line these up. So width-wise, I would say the Galaxy S4 actually looks a little bit wider. And I can try to confirm that. It actually is. It's about a millimeter, well, about a millimeter and a half wider. So, and you can kind of see that there. But the HTC One, definitely taller by about a full millimeter. That doesn't seem like much, but it's definitely a little bit taller. So wider, but again, back to the design. The designs couldn't be more different, right? You've got this all metal silver back. You've got white accents. You've got subtle sort of white bars and metallics, touches and things all around the device on the HTC One. With the Galaxy S4, you have a sort of standard metal band around the device that we've seen on countless devices over the years. It's made of plastic. You do sort of have I keep wanting to call it textured back, but it's not really textured, right? It's sort of a pattern printed on a plastic back, and it's the sort of dotted pattern you can kind of see there. So you can see these dots. It doesn't feel like anything, it just feels like a plastic back. So keep that in mind. The Samsung logo, you can't necessarily feel that. So you definitely don't have any texture going on here. It just feels like a glossy, smooth back. As you can tell, you've got smears and fingerprints are definitely gonna be a problem on the Galaxy S4. The HTC One, on the other hand, you can actually feel the HTC logo, sort of gives you a nice texture there. You have a Beats logo that you can't, but again, this thing's all metal, smooth. Mine has scuffed a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but not in a negative way, I wouldn't say. It just sort of maybe looks a little weathered, but it's definitely holding up all right. So again, designs couldn't be more different. But let's talk about the bottoms here. Okay, so we've got two sort of interesting Android setups that are not necessarily traditional whatsoever. With HTC's device, we have a home and back button for navigation, and that is it. You've got home and back, there's no menu button, and there's also no multitasking button. Okay, the HTC logo is just a logo, it's not an actual button. On the Galaxy S4, on the other hand, you have a home button along with back and menu. And this is actually a physical home button that you would press down that you would press in, just like you've seen on the Galaxy S3 and Galaxy Note 2. And then you have sort of soft, capacitive back and menu buttons. Okay, so definitely a different approach there. I'm not going to say I'm a fan of either, to tell you the truth. I'm a big fan of on-screen navigation keys. So definitely a big difference. The other thing I want to point out then is, well, here's your front camera up front with the with HTC One, and I believe it's a 2 megapixel, but it's a wide angle front camera, so you can actually capture a lot more if you're taking selfies with all your friends and all that stuff. The 2 megapixel camera on the Galaxy S4 I do not believe is wide angle, so it's just sort of a standard camera. But the big difference then on the front is speakers, right? So you've got dual boom sound speakers, they're calling them. They're amplified speakers on the HTC One, and I'm telling you, they are amazing. Like, if you want a sound experience from a phone, you're only going to get it with the HTC One. There is no front speaker on the Galaxy S4. The only speaker you have is right there on the back. It's not a bad speaker by any means, but once you've lived with boom sound and you switch over to the Galaxy S4 or back to a device with a rear speaker, it's just not really the same. So again, you've got no speaker on the back of the HTC One because they've got two massive ones on the front. So that's sort of what we're looking at as far as Galaxy S4 versus HTC One. Sort of a look from the side. Both really nice devices, but as far as hardware goes, you've got to give it to HTC on this one. They've built an incredibly beautiful looking device. Personally, I think it's a little too tall for my liking, but I could probably get used to that. The Galaxy S4 feels like Galaxy S3. If you're gonna pick this up, you're just gonna feel comfortable with it right away, especially if you spent any time with the Galaxy S3. So this has been a comparison of just these two devices in general as far as hardware goes. Let's talk just for a second about software, because they definitely differ a lot there as well. So software, we've got TouchWiz in the Galaxy S4, and you've got HTC Sense 5 over here on the HTC One. So lock switches or lock screens are going to be a lot different. You've definitely got the shortcuts at the bottom of the device, but then you've also got the ability to unlock it. So swipe unlocks here. Swipe unlocks here. When you first get to the home screen of HTC One, you get Blink Feed, which is one of their new software features. With Samsung, you get your standard TouchWiz, which just sort of looks like a normal Android home screen, right? So you've got that going on. App drawer. Definitely a big difference on the HTC One, just because they've really minimalized everything. Like, you've got a 3x4 app drawer here. You can change that to 4x5, but it just sort of comes off a lot different than what you're used to. It's also a vertical scroller, and on the Galaxy S4, you've got a horizontal scroller, which has sort of become the standard. So with Samsung, you've got, even though it's heavily skinned TouchWiz, you've got a more traditional sort of Android layout with home screens and an app drawer. HTC is completely going away from all of that and doing something sort of wild and different. It's gonna be interesting to see if people really adopt it or not. Okay, so if we go back home, and I'm gonna go into settings. Well, here's the notification bars for each, right? So quite different. You don't have any quick toggles from HTC, even though it's Jelly Bean. You definitely do have a bunch with Samsung and the Galaxy S4. So I definitely missed those in my time reviewing the HTC One. I hope they come when they get Android 4.2.2. So let's go ahead and go into settings. These are what the settings menus look like. So HTC actually went with a more traditional Android layout with theirs. They've sort of got it sectioned off, vertical scrolling. They've sort of created a lot of their own categories, which they've done a number of times over the years, but it's a vertical scroller, and again, a lot more traditional as far as Android goes. Samsung, on the other hand, went with a tabbed approach that I am not a fan of. It's organized really oddly. You're gonna have to really learn it again if you're coming from another Android device. These still scroll, but they're limited, and again, they're categorized off into sections that I don't necessarily understand. So that's sort of what that looks like. This is really I just wanted to give you sort of a basic overview in general of the differences. One of the other things though, the task switcher, if you pull that up, the task switcher looks completely different. Actually, let me open some things up here so that you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so task switcher, Samsung goes sort of traditional with the sort of vertical scrolled task switcher that you can swipe things away on. HTC went completely different and gives you this sort of mini card layout that'll stack up the screen, and to swipe those away, you just swipe up. Samsung, to get rid of something, you swipe it left and right. With Samsung, you also have a Google Now shortcut. In order to access Google Now on HTC One, you have to hold home and hope that it works. And there, we got it to work. I haven't set this phone up because it's broken, but trust me, that's how you get there. So those are essentially the big software things that we want to show you. Obviously, we could dive into differences all day and night. I don't think you necessarily need to do that. We've done software tours on the HTC One. You can find that video. We just sort of did one with the Galaxy S4, so you can find that video as well. But that's sort of what they look like side by side. Galaxy S4, more traditional Android layout with a pretty heavy Samsung TouchWiz skin. HTC One completely going away from whatever standard Android practices have been practiced over the last number of years, but a much more minimal and probably a cleaner look. I actually prefer the look to what HTC is doing. I just don't necessarily like the functionality of it. I don't like the look of Galaxy S4 and TouchWiz, but I do like the functionality of it, if that makes sense. So anyways, we got more coming. Since this video is incredibly long, I'm now going to do a separate video comparing this to the Galaxy S3 and Nexus 4. So hang with us. We got a ton more coverage to come. Galaxy S4 in the house, full reviews up. Make sure you go check it out. We are Droid Life.